Good afternoon. Captain Justin DeLeon here from the University of Iowa, Army ROTC, APMS here at Iowa, and also the MS3 instructor. Today we're going to be talking about defensive operations at the platoon level, and specifically we're going to be talking about a perimeter defense. The references that we'll be using today will be 3-21.8, Infantry Platoon and Squad. That'll be our main reference that we use. So the purpose of today's lesson is to go over a perimeter defense and talk over a doctrinally sound way to do it. Defense is a very, very complex operation, whether you're doing all kinds of defenses, area defense, mobile defense, delay, withdraws, reverse slope, perimeter. There's so many different types of defense operations. There's so much that goes into them. You could talk for hours about it. So I'm going to focus in on perimeter defense today. The reason I'm going to focus on this is a defense that a lot of our cadets encounter either at the programs or at advanced camp, but it's definitely all the characteristics and things that we do here will be applicable to any defense on the battlefield. All right, so today, talking about perimeter defense. We got our EA development here. This is one of the key parts of a defensive operation, is developing our engagement areas where we want to kill the enemy. We've also got our battle positions here: primary, alternate, supplementary, subsequent, and strong point. All right, we're going to talk about those throughout as well. The key ones that I really want to focus on today is our primary battle positions and our supplementary battle positions. Those will definitely come into key play in a perimeter defense. Okay, so first of all, what is a perimeter defense? A perimeter defense is basically where you have to defend with 360 security around yourself. So a patrol base would be an example of a perimeter defense. Typically, a perimeter defense is in wooded terrain or heavily vegetated terrain, or it's in urban terrain. It's a great place where you could do, the Alamo is a great example of a classic perimeter defense where you're confined to a compound or a building or a neighborhood block where you're trying to basically maintain 360 security and not allow the enemy into your AO. Okay. Typically, when we do a perimeter defense, we're holding some type or piece of key terrain that we do not want the enemy to seize or secure. All right. The biggest thing about it also is that you are not mutually supported by any other elements. So if you are a platoon and you're doing a perimeter defense, you're basically out there alone and unafraid without immediate support from someone else. All right, maybe they're trying to get to you, whatever it is may be, but you need to hold on in that location for however long it may be. All right. So usually when we do defensive operations, like I said, we're part of a company, battalion, or brigade larger defense. This example, we're by ourselves. Okay, so we got our perimeter defense here. So we're going to kind of walk through a basic scenario of what this would look like and the steps to make this a good and decent defense that's going to stop the enemy and at least make sure we heavily disrupt his operation. So we have this circle here. Very simple, but we have to do a perimeter defense around this circle, all right? So what we're going to do first is we're going to do our EA development, all right, and try to identify enemy average approach, determine their course of action, where we want to kill them, and then we're going to start in placing our elements in order to do that. Okay, so one of the first main elements we got to do once we identify our location is we got to do a recon. We got to recon the area to make sure, all right, that we identify all these things. So the PL is going to do a recon around the perimeter defense, all right, and identify, number one, what are the enemy likely avenues of approach, okay? Basically, he can do this in many ways, but he could cloverleaf, he could go around in a circle, but the main thing is he's got to get out there, okay? The best way to visualize where the enemy's likely avenues of approach are is for him to get out there and look around and say, hey, if I were going to attack this objective, if I were trying to take this terrain, how would I do it? All right, that's the best way. So let's say the PL is out here and he's able to see that there are some great mobility corridors here to the east and to the south, where the enemy has some cover and concealment, but he can also move rapidly. We got to remember one thing that the enemy needs to do typically is they need to move hard and fast onto that objective, okay? Let's say the PL identifies that there's a lot of thick brush and thicket over here to the northwest. Now the enemy could try and sneak up on us and attack from that position. So that is an avenue of approach that he could use, but he's considering that very unlikely because he has 100 meters of thick brush to get through, and he's going to make a lot of noise doing so. All right, so we're going to hear him from a far way off. These two provide him the best avenue approach into the objective. Okay. The PL now, let's say, for scenario's sake, has also identified a small little mound here, all right, that has observation fields of fire over the objective, okay? And he thinks that the enemy is going to try and put their support by fire here. It's a great position for the enemy to put that support by fire position. Okay? So now we're starting to go into that second step, determine enemy course of action. So we got AOA, let's call it, we got AOA 1 here. We got AOA 2. We got AOA 3. We think these are most likely with, let's say, AOA 1 being most likely, somewhat likely, and much more like least likely, okay? And now we're saying, hey, determining his course of action, we think he's going to put his support by fire up on that mound, and we think that he's going to attack along AOA 1, most likely. He may attack along AOA 2, okay? So we've kind of determined how he's going to do it. Also, we know for a fact that the enemy likely has mortars, hopefully not artillery, but maybe he has both. And he's probably got some fires targets in our security, within our perimeter. So we should expect to see indirect fire as well in order to help facilitate, suppress, and facilitate that assault through. Okay? So there's obviously a lot more in depth and a lot more detail we can go into identifying an enemy course of action and really hammering down into the details. But basically, this is kind of what we're looking at. So we could go through and talk, hey, he's going to move a team here, he's going to move a squad here, then he's going to do a feint here and hit here. He could get very deep. Okay, for now, we're going to leave it at this. Okay, so we got a basic enemy course of action of what are the possible ones. Okay, and now we want to determine where do we want to kill the enemy. We got to determine where we want to kill him. Okay, so again, we think he's either coming on AOA 1 or AOA 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some engagement areas along those avenues of approach. All right. So we got EA2 down here, and we got EA1 over here. Okay, these are these boxes that we define where we want to kill the enemy, where we see that we have good fields of fire and observation on those objectives or those engagement areas, and we'll be able to lay effective fires and mass and concentrate all fires that we have on those positions. If we feel like we're capable of doing that, that's where we want to kill them. That's where we want to kill them. Okay, so we've identified now, we're going to kill them there. All right. Next is we want to integrate obstacles into this. Okay, so we want to integrate potential obstacles that we have. So if we're lucky, we have some type of mines, maybe we have some digging assets, but really what this is going to result in if we have any extra C-wire. Okay, so we got 4 types of obstacles we can have, right? We've got disrupt, we got turn, we got fix, and we got block. All right, those are the different types of obstacles we can use, okay? With C-wire, the best you're probably hoping for is disruption. Maybe a little bit of fix, but mostly disruption, okay? If we had some, maybe we place some along the avenue of approach in order to disrupt. Okay? Or if we have enough, maybe we put a fixing obstacle in here. That makes it so the enemy gets stuck and gets bogged down in that EA, and it's easier to kill them there, okay? Either way, that's what we pretty much have at our disposal, all right? Likely, in many scenarios, you might not have the ability, all right, to have obstacles. What you can use to help you with this, though, is you can use claymores. That kind of goes into more using your assets, but we definitely want to be placing claymores along these, in these engagement areas. It probably might be a good idea as well. If we have the ability, we could place a claymore up here oriented out towards that support by fire position where we likely think the enemy is going to lay down his machine gun teams. Okay? But now we basically integrated obstacles to try and, one, force him into those engagement areas, disrupt his movement up, and also fix him potentially once he's inside that engagement area so we can destroy him. Okay. Now we want to emplace our weapon systems. So really now we're starting to emplace our defense around our perimeter and throughout. All right, we're starting to identify that. This is challenging. All right, this is challenging, but it's very possible if we just lay down our priorities. Okay, so we know our priorities are AOA 2 and AOA 1. That's where we likely think the enemy's going to come. That's where we want to kill them. Okay, so first of all, what I like to do, I like to place my most casualty producing weapons first. So those 240 Bravos, those machine guns. So I'm probably going to place a machine gun facing down here. One machine gun team here and one machine gun team here. And those are going to be their primary battle positions. All right, so let's say I got my Alpha gun here and I got my Bravo gun here. And those will be their primary battle positions. Okay? Now I'm looking and I'm thinking, hey, I want to have additional troops in the AOA 1 for sure because I think that's where the enemy is most likely coming. Okay? So I'm going to put a team-sized battle position there, and maybe that's Alpha from A1. Actually, let's change that. Let's go, it's Alpha team from A2. Okay? And then maybe on the other side of this machine gun, I've got Bravo from A2. So I basically got my Assault 2 squad here with that Alpha machine gun. All right? And they're working fires on this engagement area. All right, direct fires. Down here with the Bravo machine gun, I'm going to put my Alpha team from A1 down here. And they're working fires together on this engagement area. Okay? I got some other elements left. I'm going to put Bravo from A1 in here. And they're going to be my strike force. All right? I'm going to talk about them a little bit later. Okay? And now we got our security squad. There's different ways to use them. There's different ways to employ them. I'm going to give a technique, something that helps, okay? Something that could be used. So we got to make sure that we still have 360 security. We got to make sure we have that, all right? So what I'm going to do in this situation, all right, I've got 3 enemies under approach. What I'm likely going to do is I'm going to basically put one men's locations on the back side of my perimeter, all right, to make sure I'm watching these areas as well, okay? So I'm maintaining that 360 security, but I'm overloading certain sides where I'm confident the enemy is going to choose to come from, okay? And now I still got 6 people remaining from that security squad. So this is all the security squad right here on this side. I got 6 people. The way I like to use them, and the way I think is an effective way to use them, is we need to have OPs, all right? We need to have OPs out in front of our position, okay? So if I'm doing this, I'm probably going to put an OP back in this thicket to make sure I identify anyone moving this way. I'll put an OP up in this elevated terrain here, identify support moving in, identify this assault element maybe, and I'll put an OP down here. That can identify anything moving in that area or anything moving down here. So ideally, I've got OPs around my perimeter looking for movement all the way around, okay? And they're serving 2 purposes. One, they're providing me early warning of enemy movement around the objective. And 2, all right, they're disrupting enemy movement around the objective, okay? Before any fight, and understanding this is also going to help you when it comes to platoon attack or platoon raid, because the enemy likely will have their OPs out there in front of you, all right, when you're trying to attack. But anyways, got my OPs out. They got 2 things they're doing. So they're conducting early warning techniques. So they're trying to identify where the enemy is coming from and provide that information to the PL. So I'll say headquarters is in the middle. All right. And also they're there to disrupt enemy movement. Okay. So one of the key things that happens is there's going to be a recon fight. All right. What's the first thing that we do once we get to our ORP in a platoon attack, let's say, and we're going to hit an objective? What's the first thing we do after we prep men, weapons, and equipment in that ORP? We're going to go conduct a leader's recon the objective, identify where we want our assault and support, get a clear view of it, and hit that objective correctly. All right. So what do you think the enemy's going to do when you're in a defense? They're going to be doing their recon. They want to recon this objective. Your job and the job of your OPs is to not let them recon this objective. Fight that recon off, all right? If the enemy can't see you and cannot get eyes on the objective, they cannot make an effective attack. And if their time runs out, 1, they have to abort. 2, they have to make a hasty attack with limited knowledge, which gives the advantage to you, okay? So that's what the OPs are doing, all right? One thing we got to make sure and think about before we send these OPs out is comms. They got to have communication back to the PL. So whether it's Assault 1 or Assault 2 or someone else, they're giving up radios to these OPs so we can communicate with them and they can report back to the PL. Very important, okay? What they also got to have, I'll draw it over here, they got to have engagement criteria. And they also got to have disengagement criteria. What does that mean? That means we're telling them what to shoot at and what not to shoot at, or when to shoot and when to withdraw, okay? So we're looking at this and we're saying, hey, OPs, if you run into an enemy element that's 4 people or less, you're clear to engage, all right? Engage, disrupt them, all right? Do not let them get within sight of this objective because it's likely the enemy recon. If they're coming into if an element of 5 people or more comes into view of them, they are to empty a magazine and then withdraw back to the security posture, okay? So we're working through that. So we want to give them what to engage and what to disengage from because that'll give them the intent of the PL on the ground, okay? Now, here we go into a very, very important part whereas we're emplacing weapon systems and doing our defense, okay? And that is the biggest part of this is fire control measures, okay? It's very easy for fratricide to happen, all right? Especially if I got OPs out here, fratricide is very likely if I'm shooting out from my perimeter, okay? So I got to be careful with this. So what I'm doing is a method, okay, is what I like to do is I like to split this into sections. So what I'll do, just like on any defense, is I will find a TRP out here, a target reference point that I identify. Maybe it's a big tree, a big boulder, whatever it is. This is TRP, let's say, here, actually, let's go this way. So I'll do one here. I'll probably do something like up here. So TRP1, TRP2, TRP3, okay? Overall platoon TRPs, all right, as fire control measures, okay? So what I can do is I can then name these sections. See how I've split it into 3 sections? I can have up here, hey, this is section 1, this is section 2, this is section 3, okay? And now I can say, hey, all sections, section 1, 2, and 3 are all cold. All cold. You can't shoot into that section because my OPs are out there. When this OP either goes to ground, which means he's basically getting his face in a hole and going to ground, or he withdraws because he engaged a large enemy element and then moved back to the secure posture in here. Now I can say, hey, section 1 is hot, section 1 is hot, 2 is cold, and 3 is cold, okay? I'm constantly communicating that out. If the enemy is identified in section 1 and section 2 and both OPs move back in, hey, section 1 and 2, they're hot. Section 1 and 2 are hot, section 3 is cold, okay? I can use that as a fire control measure throughout to make sure we're not conducting fratricide, all right? Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so I've got all that here. I've got some control measures in place, all right? And now what I want to do is I want to plan and integrate indirect fires. So whether I have mortars or friendly artillery and general support to me, whatever I got, I want to make sure I got fires targets out here, okay? So let's say my higher element has given me 3 targets. Where would I probably put them? I want to mass and concentrate fires where I want to kill the enemy, right? So I'm probably going to put a fires target in this EA. So I'll say this is, I'll call this 02, target 02. I'll put one in this EA, target 01, and maybe I'll put one up in here, target 03, where I think the support's going to be, okay? Again, the naming convention of the target will obviously change, but that's how I might make my targets, okay? Now, something to think through, okay? These OPs can also call for fire out if they see enemy moving into the area, okay? People sometimes get confused. Just because I only have 3 targets doesn't mean these are the only 3 locations that I can fire on. They're just meant to expedite the fires process. So hey, I need to fire for effect on target 02. I got 10 men in the open, all right? they're going to shoot that target. If I see people out here, okay, I don't have a target there, but I can still do a call for fire mission from this OP on that element, okay? So you can fire on more. This is just to expedite the fire's process in those engagement areas and where I think that support by fire is going to be. Okay, so I got my fires in place, okay? Now I want to integrate some more control measures. I already got my sections labeled, okay? But something that really, really helps with defense, really helps, is what's called trigger lines, okay? And sometimes it's hard to find this in certain doctrines, but trigger lines really, really help. And what I mean by that is, let's talk through a scenario. Let's say back here, there's a tree line, all right? And I've got some enemy forces that move past this tree line, okay? I got enemy forces that move past that tree line, and all of a sudden, I mean, my machine gunner here, my alpha machine gunner, he wants to kill someone. He wants to shoot, right? Obviously. So he sees them come out that tree line, and he immediately starts firing. Is that a good thing? Probably not. Probably he might get 1 or 2 kills, but the rest of this element is going to get back in the tree line, grab cover, and then now they're going to consolidate and reorganize, and they're going to try and hit from their angle, okay? The point is we need to wait until this element is in that engagement area before we start shooting at them, okay? Now, if they identify us and they're shooting at us early, maybe we need to fire back. But the point is we do not want to open up. We're trying to kill them in that engagement area. So we don't want to discourage them from getting in, okay? So when I talk about that is different trigger lines for different weapon systems, okay? So maybe my weapon squad, they're not allowed to start firing, okay? This is their direct fire, that's their direct fire trigger line. And they're not allowed to start firing until they see that. Maybe my M4s, they can start firing a little bit earlier, all right? M4 trigger line for direct fire. Okay, whatever it is, but I'm picking points and I'm demonstrating this to everyone, okay? And a key way to identify something is pick a piece of terrain out there, okay? So maybe I got like a tree. This is my terrible excuse for a tree here. But maybe I got a tree right here that the weapon squad can be like, okay, you guys see that tree? When the enemy forces get to that tree, now you can start shooting, okay? And we need to do the same thing on this side. We got trigger lines over here for different weapon systems, all right? Whether it's a machine gun or M4 or 249, whatever we got, okay? The other trigger line we need to put in there is our indirect fire. Let's say we got an indirect fire trigger line. And the reason we got to do this is because we need to know when to call for fire on our targets, okay? What happens often is we wait until the enemy is almost at this engagement area to call for fire. If they somehow get through here and the fire is landing there now, it wasn't effective. We need that fire to land when the enemy is in that engagement area, okay? So what we gotta do is we gotta do some time distance analysis and say, hey, when the enemy hits this trigger line, which maybe it's a big boulder or whatever the terrain feature is, we're gonna call the target so that by the time they get to that engagement area, that's when the rounds are impacting and we're getting effects, okay? So we gotta include all that in this plan. Those trigger lines will help keep us disciplined and will help keep us putting mass and concentrating fires on that engagement area at the right time, okay? It doesn't matter if you're doing it if you're not doing it correctly at the correct time. Okay, the last thing I want to mention with our terrain features here, our battle positions, okay? So right now, everyone's in their primary battle positions, all right? And we need to be prepared to move to other types of battle positions. In a perimeter defense, the big ones that we're going to focus on are our primary and our supplementary, okay? So primary is where we're starting, focused on certain avenues of approach. An alternate is a different position oriented on the same avenue of approach. So basically, if Alpha team of Alpha 2 squad moved down here, but was still oriented on this avenue of approach, that would be the definition of an alternate battle position. However, now we have supplementary. A supplementary battle position is when, let's say the enemy does attack through AOA 2, and we have a supplementary built here for this weapon squad. If they were to move down here and now start firing on this avenue approach, an alternate avenue approach, that is their supplementary battle position, okay? So what we got to do is we got to build these battle positions throughout. All right, so everyone's in their primary now, but we come up with a plan where if the enemy comes through AOA 2, this weapons team moves down and takes position right there, and maybe this team moves down and takes position down here, and they're putting fires now on this EA. And we just leave one team with still security in this direction, okay? If they come on AOA 3, maybe we got 2 teams from each side moving up here to supplementary battle positions along this line. If they come on AOA 1, maybe this Alpha team A1 stays here, but the Bravo team from the machine gun squad moves there to help put fires on EA. The point is we got different sets for what the enemy wants to do, okay? So something that I like to do, just call them code names. Call this one gold, call this one black, so black, gold, and like silver or something, all right? And so based on what I say, hey, black, 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 that means the enemy is coming from this direction, move to the positions that are associated with this avenue approach down here. If I say gold, 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 the enemy is coming from this position, all right? Move to the battle position that is oriented correctly, okay? And that's how we do it, okay? So we're gonna brief these primary, I'm gonna erase all this so it doesn't get all messed up, but we're gonna brief these primary and alternate positions, or these primary and supplementary positions in our order, okay? And now how do we confirm that everyone's tracking? Because that's a lot. That's a lot. Hey, if they're going silver, my team's over here. If they're going gold, I'm over here. If they're going black, I'm over here. Okay? That's a lot. So how do we do it? Okay? Yes, we spot check. Yes, we back brief. Rehearsals. Rehearse. Probably the biggest part of EA development. We are going to rehearse, rehearse, rehearse as much as we can. Okay? So the PL is literally going to call out black, and he's going to ensure that everyone goes to their correct battle position on black. All right, if the enemy was to come on AOA 2. Yells gold does the same thing, okay? Rehearse this and make sure you correct deficiencies. And you know what? When you rehearse, you're going to identify plans in your security. Or sorry, plans. You're going to identify holes in your security. You're going to identify holes with your communication from these OPs, okay? Again, as these OPs retrograde back to you, now they can join in this strike force, okay? And now comes in the strike force, all right? We always want to have a strike force prepared and ready to maneuver on the enemy, okay? And the reason is we want to basically defeat the enemy in their attack. So ideally, the enemy is moving down, let's say AOA 1, they get bogged down in the engagement area, they get fixed, we're destroying them, and they're at a very vulnerable moment. We take the strike force and we envelop right, all right? And we move and we destroy with them, okay? We gotta use control measures though when we employ that strike force. So right now I have it as one team. But something I like to do is when these OPs withdraw in, I have them join the strike force and build combat power that way. So let's say they wanted to move to the right and attack the enemy or assault the enemy as he's pushing through, envelop him there, okay? They can do so, but now I gotta make sure everyone knows, hey, section 2 is now cold. Section 2 is now cold. And I make sure that this team knows they can't push past this TRP1 because I need section 1 to stay hot, okay? All this needs to be rehearsed. We're rehearsing the strike force going to the right, rehearsing the strike force going to the left, and making different sections hot and cold, okay? It can get complex, but if you rehearse it well, it can work. It really can, okay? The other great thing to rehearse as well is these trigger lines, all right? A great technique is send a soldier out there with a radio and have him start at this tree line and start walking in, all right? He's at that ADF trigger line, you tell him to stop. And whoever's responsible for calling that IDF target in the engagement area, you talk to him and you say, hey, do you see where that soldier is right now? When the enemy gets past that position, when they hit that position, call the target. Now they can visually see it. It's a better representation. Then they move forward and they hit these trigger lines and they're talking to those different weapon systems. Hey, do you see where that soldier's at right now? He's next to that big tree. When the enemy gets there, that's when I want you to open up. That's when I want you to initiate fire. Make sense? So again, the more rehearsals you can do to confirm everyone knows what's going on and understands their role, whether it's black, it's gold, it's silver, whether they're attacking this way or this way, is key, okay? One suggestion I want to bring up is I think it's a good SOP that only the PL and only the PL is the one that calls the direction where the enemy is coming from. Gold, black, silver. Because what could easily happen is down here, one of these soldiers, let's say an Alpha Team, Alpha 1 squad or Assault 1, he's looking at his engagement area. And all of a sudden, he sees 4 enemy soldiers in his view. And his limited scope of what's going on, because all he's seeing is he thinks the attack's coming, right? He thinks the attack's coming. Now, all of a sudden, he yells out black, 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 and everyone starts shifting, okay? When really, the enemy was just doing a feint, hitting with a 4-man team there, and then hitting with, a squad plus and actually assaulting into the objective there, okay? We gotta be careful about committing to one or the other. And that's why we have security spread out until we absolutely confirm that the enemy is moving avenue approach, then we can move to those actual plans. So the PL, he's the one that's looking at all 3 sides. He's getting reports from everywhere. He's the one that needs to make that call. And for me, if I was facing against another enemy platoon, if I saw a squad plus, all right, so an element, a squad or higher, coming at me from a certain direction, I have 90% certainty that's most likely the assault. And maybe then I'll be ready to make that call, okay? But the point is do not commit to black, gold, or silver, one of your plans, too early, okay? And don't commit your strike force too early as well. Commit that only when you're confident that they're going to have easy access and be able to destroy that enemy position, okay? Okay, so I know this looks like a lot here, but I think I talked through it, step by step as best I could. But the point is this is a good example of how to plan a perimeter defense, okay? There are so many variables when you go into terrain and obviously the MET-TC. There are so many variables that make every perimeter defense and every defensive operation different, all right? But these are the fundamentals you gotta do. And every time you gotta do that initial recon and you've gotta do your EA development. You got to, okay? And you got to use these different battle positions to build in flexibility to your plan. Flexibility, and you've got to have the strike force to maneuver. All those pieces are key to making a very successful defense, an aggressive defense, all right? If you just basically take up a hasty 360 security and wait for the enemy to come to you, it's going to be bad, all right? And these OPs are key. Disruption is going to be huge, all right? As they disrupt, they're going to throw the enemy off their game. Again, we're trying to limit them from recon the objective, but also if this support by fire actually gets established here, all right, and now this OP puts direct fire contact in this enemy, all right, we're delaying him. We're disrupting his movement in. And now his coordination between him and the support are off, all right? Maybe they're expecting an attack here. This disruption happened, and now they got to swing around and come this way, all right? The coordination and the timing is off. We want to do that as much as possible and make the enemy feel uncomfortable moving in. Okay, so I hope you learned something from today. Again, this is just one type of defensive operation, but it was good to go over. And again, thanks for listening in.